Hi everyone, welcome back to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I'm going to talk to you about the books that I read in January. So I read 4 books in January, still no audiobooks, although I have started one, so maybe we'll get there. 4 physical books to talk to you about. The first one was a library book, so I've taken it back, so I'll insert a picture here. And it was the delightful A Snowfall of Silver by Laura Wood. This was recommended to me by my friend Alex in my writing group. It's a YA book and it is about Freya Trevelyan, who is a 18-year-old bright young thing. It's set in 1930 something. So it's pre-war and it's very nostalgic. So the reason I read this because I wanted to start off the year strong. I wanted to start off with a book that I knew would be good, and because Alex had recommended it to me as kind of very warm and comforting and lovely, that's what I wanted and that's what I got, and it was just perfect to start the year off. So we follow Freya as she runs away from home in a rather dramatic but unnecessary bid for freedom. So she runs away from her big Cornish family to try and make a living as an actress in London. So she's got this dream of being an actress and just gets on a train and goes to London to start her acting career. Conveniently, she meets a playwright on the train, Kit, who works at a theatre in London, and gets her a job as a seamstress there. And she goes, her sister is in London, she goes to stay with her sister. She falls in with this theatre company and they immediately go on tour. So they take this this play on tour and she is part of the company as the seamstress assistant. And it's just lovely. Like, it was just what I needed. It was very comforting and nostalgic. She wants to have a love affair and kind of feel and live life, and that's what she does. It's a coming of age story, and she learns about herself and other people as she interacts with them. She has a little bit of romance and it's just lovely. Perfect. I've not read anything by Laura Wood before. I will definitely pick up her other novels now. So yes, I very much enjoyed that one. Now, something completely different, very different. I read Dirty Work by Julia Bell. This was the book club choice for my university's Women's Society book club. So this, again, is a YA novel, but it's very short. And this is the complete other end of the spectrum. This looks at sex trafficking. So, I mean, it's quite a hard topic for a young adult novel, but it was done very well. Julia is an amazing writer. She teaches creative writing at Birkbeck, which is the university that I go to. And this book is very well done. So it's following 2 characters, Hope, who is a very spoilt, privileged young girl from Norfolk, and Oksana, who is abducted into this sex trafficking ring. Because she is from a very impoverished part of Russia. She has to deal with her mother dying at a very young age. She takes over the responsibilities of being a mother to her baby brother and looking after her father when they have like minimal money. So she's come from this really impoverished place, and all she wants to do is be able to eat. Like, it's that basic. She's struggling to find food for them to eat, and every day is difficult, every day is cold, every day they don't have enough food. And so when an opportunity comes, this guy in a posh car rocks up to their village and offers her work as a waitress in London. She thinks that's what she's going for, and of course it's not that. They abduct her. There is obviously trigger warning. This is dark stuff. Trigger warning. There, it's very well done. There is one scene where Oksana gets raped, but it's not explicit, it's not graphic. You know what's happening, and that's very disturbing, obviously. But I actually spoke to Julia Bell. We, in our book club, which was obviously online, I said to her, it makes me really nervous when I read stuff like this because I think that it's going to go into graphic detail, so I'm glad that didn't happen. And she said, when she was doing the research for this book, that she was very aware that she didn't want it to be read by anyone as like for the purposes of reading something graphic to get off on it. because she said about this thing, what was it now? I don't know, it was like Pontanet or something horrendous, where men who use brothels, who use rape women that are sold into sexual slavery, have this this website where they compare like what you can get. It's disgusting. And anyway, the police are on it all the time, so they track it and everything, which is great. But yeah, so she said because of that, and also there was a documentary, on sex trafficking, and they're on this website. The men were all like, "Oh, we're going to be on telly tonight, lads," like bragging about it. What the fuck? What is that? And they were kind of gonna use it to get off. It was disgusting. And so she was like, it gave me a new insight to like the levels of depravity. So she was very careful in the way that she wrote the difficult stuff. Nevertheless, this was still hard to read. So we follow Hope, who comes into contact with Oksana on I think it's a ferry, when Hope's coming home from a holiday, and Oksana has been like kidnapped and is being moved to where she's supposed to be, in this brothel, and Hope kind of tries to help her out because she senses something's wrong, and they fall in together, and then Hope gets embroiled in this sex trafficking business. She gets kidnapped too. So the point of the book is to show, it's very well done, the way there's lots of, at the beginning, Hope's parents are very arrogant and wealthy and have certain views about Eastern European people and refugees and migrants and all that. So it tackles xenophobia, and it looks at the way that British people other Eastern European people and set themselves apart. So it looks at how it doesn't matter in this kind of scenario when you've got two very different characters. They've both been kidnapped, they're both going to get raped. Doesn't matter where they're from or how they've ended up there or how they've got there. They're both 15-year-old girls that should not be in that position. So yeah, it was a hard read, but it was a very good book. But that, especially after a Snowfall of Silver, that was like two complete opposites. But I'm glad this is available for like young readers to understand that kind of, and that's what Julia said. That's what she wanted to do, was to make young girls realise that they're, or British young girls, they're not better than anyone else. They're not less likely to end up in this situation. So yeah, that was very good. I've got a real mix of books this month. They're all so different. Next, I read, for my other book group, A Ghost in the Throat by Doireann. Now, this book blew my mind. It was so good, and I know I'm going to struggle to describe it because it is a mixture of all of the things. So, Doireann is a poet. This is a non-fiction book about the life of is it 18? Yeah, an 18th century noblewoman. So, whose name is Eileen Dove. It's a very long name, but she shortens it to Eileen Dove. So Eileen Dove wrote a poem, and like kind of an epic poem, which was a lament to her husband, who was murdered. So her husband was Art O'Leary, and he was murdered, and she wrote this poem, which is like, I think they call it a keen, like a cry for him when he's murdered. And apparently this poem is taught in Irish schools. I've never heard of it before. Obviously, I'm not Irish. It's the first time I've come across it. But Doireann came across it when she was a child, so she studied it in school. And this book tells of her obsession with finding out about the life of Eileen Dove, because nothing was written about her. Nothing was written about her life, other than, as a side note, where she's mentioned as the wife of Art O'Leary, the mother of her children, and as the sister of her brothers. So where she's referenced in historical documents is in letters. So her brother's letters she's mentioned, but there was no work done on her. Like, there's no memoir, there's no historical record about her life, there's no record about where she was buried, when she died, anything like that. So this book attempts to build up an image of what her life might have been. So although it's non-fiction, it does blend fiction in with it, because there are episodes where she's like, there's nothing for me to go on here, there's no historical record, I don't know what happened here, but I'm going to imagine this. And she plays out a scene that feels so real, and it's totally fictionalized, but it's based around like I don't know, she finds like a piece of a fragment of cup or something on the ground at a place where this woman has been, like at the site of one of her previous houses, and from that fragment she builds up a picture of what that object might have been, and how this woman may have interacted with it, and what that scene looked like. And it's just incredible. It was so fantastic, and because she's a poet, it's so poetic, but not like overdone. It's just beautifully written. It was so lovely. So alongside the life of Eileen Dove that she's trying to build up are fragments from her own life. So she switches backwards and forwards between her life of as being a mother and a wife, and she talks about like the mundane things, the everyday things, particularly when she's just had a child, breastfeeding, expressing milk. She donates her milk to milk banks, which is a thing I didn't know much about. So she talks about that. She talks about female bodily experience, and that's one thing that I really loved about this book, is that there are parallels drawn between the life of the author and the life of the person that she's researching, specifically being female lives, being embodied lives. There's, you know, like she talks about breast milk, how that is her life, pumping this milk, expressing this milk, and giving this milk to her babies. And she relates it back to Eileen Dove's life and imagines what her experiences of motherhood were like. And that I found really powerful. Like, there are references to certain, like, she says, she claims all the time, I'm not an academic, but this feels a little bit like, I want to compare it to Maggie Nelson's The Argonauts. Although there are no specific kind of theorists referenced in here, she's done a lot of historical research. She's like squeezed the life out of the archives that she possibly could. She's got so much out of the archives, but still there wasn't enough there. And she references like writing in white ink, which is a reference to Siksu and breast milk as ink. And the refrain that goes throughout this book is, this is a female text, this is a female text. And what feels like she's doing is weaving together a physical, tangible text made from bodies and fluids and experience. And it's just so clever. I can't tell you how much I thought this was so great. Yeah, and there's lots of kind of episodes where she remembers something, like an experience where she's in the car and nearly has an accident, and that triggers back to a previous experience where she's kind of reflecting on her own life and what it means. She's saving someone else in this car accident because she was saved previously. There's an episode where she doesn't specify it, but you kind of get the impression that she tried to take her own life at some point, and that being saved then echoes through her own subjectivity as wanting to save other people. So yeah, it's just so rich. There's so much to unpack in this. I was gonna like thinking about making a video just on this because it's just marvelous. I would not I just can't recommend this highly enough, and it's one of those books where I think you can reread it and still get so much out of it. I love this a lot. Also at the end, so the poem that she's talking about is at the end of the book, and I did think, because I thought when I started reading it, I don't know this poem, maybe I should read the poem to get some context, but she puts the poem at the end of the book. Oh, where is it now? Let me show you. The Keen for Art O'Leary, and it's on, so you've got the Irish text on one side and the English translation on another. This is her translation, so part of this work was her translating the poem anew, and I did listen to a previous translation. You can tell the difference, and I found that fascinating as well, the way that she's really talking about female desire, because this woman like clearly fancied the pants off of her husband. And that comes out in Doireann's translation more, I think, than in the traditional version. And Doireann herself talks about her desire for her husband, particularly like after her body recovers from its postpartum experience. Oh man, honestly, it was so good. And the best part about reading the poem at the end was that I had such an emotional response to it, because every chapter is preceded by a little quote from the poem, so 1 or 2 lines from the poem. By the time you get to the end, it's like, oh God, you're finally hearing this woman's voice, this woman's words in a new translation that really feels like, I mean, not that I can say it does, the other translations didn't feel like her, because I wasn't privy to them before now, but it just feels like, it felt like such an emotional read. I got a little bit teary reading it at the end. All right, I'm just going to stop banging on about this now because the video's too long, but oh my God, read this, it's amazing. Okay, and my last book was Bellman and Black by Diane Setterfield. I read this as part of the book hibernation that Simon and Tom were hosting. This was the group read, and I have read The 13th Tale before and I adored it, so I was really looking forward to getting to this. And it's called Bellman and Black, a ghost story. I'm not sure I would agree with that. It's a real slow burner. So it's a historical novel. I love historical novels. It's a bit gothic. I love the gothic. We follow this guy, William Bellman. It's basically the story of his life. So you start off with the episode at the beginning. He's 10 years old and he shoots a stone using a catapult at a rook and kills it from off this tree, which it's quite ethereal the way it's described, and he doesn't really want to kill this rook. He's just shown off to his mates. And then the book kind of follows the trajectory of his life as the trajectory of that stone going up, hitting the rook and then coming back down again. So he goes, gets married, has really successful businesses, does really well, and then weird stuff starts to happen. And he encounters the character of Mr. Black, who you're not quite sure what he is or where. He appears at funerals all the time, or the funerals of people that keep dying around William Bellman. So the book is about the mystery of who is Mr. Black and what is the deal? I did enjoy it. I felt it was too long. To me, like, this felt like it could have been a short story. There was a lot of historical detail. It felt like she'd done a lot of research, which she had. There was a lot of research in here about the way that mills run and the Victorian obsession with funerals and death, like, because Bellman runs a funeral emporium after he meets Mr. Black. And I mean, that was interesting, but I wasn't, it just felt like too much. Like, I was like, yeah. What? Where's Mr. Black? What's going on? I wanted to get back to him. There was a lot of detail about that kind of stuff, and it just felt a bit too much for me. But at the end, I thought it was quite, you get right to like the last page before you find out what's going on. And it was quite an ambiguous ending, so you could interpret it in a couple of different ways. I really like that though, and overall I enjoyed it. It wasn't as strong as 13th Tale for me, but still a really good read. If you like historical fiction, give it a go. Okay, those are the 4 books that I read in January. I'm going to stop this video because it's way too long. I will see you very soon, hopefully, for my intro to experimental writing. Okay guys, speak to you later. Bye.